reading for this morning is the Old Testament reading from 1 Samuel. Samuel has begrudgingly anointed a king for Israel at the people's insistence and God's acquiescence. And Saul has become that first king. And Saul has his good traits, but he has his bad traits, and things have soured between Saul and Samuel and Saul and God. And it has become clear that Saul can no longer be king. That is the context for our reading this morning. Listen to what the Spirit will speak to us through these words. Then Samuel went to Ramah, and Saul went up to his house in Gibeah of Saul. Samuel did not see Saul again until the day of his death. But Samuel grieved over Saul. And Yahweh was sorry that he had made Saul king over Israel. Yahweh said to Samuel, "How long will you grieve over Saul? I have rejected him from being king over Israel. Fill your horn with oil and set out. I will send you to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have provided for myself a king among his sons." Samuel said, "How can I go? If Saul hears of it, he will kill me." And Yahweh said, "Take a heifer and say, I have come to sacrifice to Yahweh. Invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you what you shall do. And you shall anoint for me the one whom I name to you." Samuel did what Yahweh commanded and came to Bethlehem. The elders of the city came to meet him trembling and said, "Do you come peaceably?" He said, "Peaceably. I have come to sacrifice to Yahweh. Sanctify yourself and come with me to the sacrifice." And he sanctified Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice. When they came, he looked on Eliab and thought, "Surely the Lord's anointed is now before Yahweh." But Yahweh said to Samuel, "Do not look upon his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For Yahweh does not see as mortals see. They look on the outward appearance, but Yahweh looks on the heart." Then Jesse made called Abinadab and made him pass before Samuel. He said, "Neither has Yahweh chosen this one." Then Jesse made Shammah pass by, and he said, "Neither has Yahweh chosen this one." Jesse made 7 of his sons pass before Samuel. And Samuel said to Jesse, "Yahweh has not chosen any of these." Samuel said to Jesse, "Are all your sons here?" And he said, "There remains yet the youngest, but he is keeping the sheep." And Samuel said to Jesse, "Send and bring him, for we will not sit down until he comes here." He sent and brought him in. Now he was ruddy and had beautiful eyes and was handsome. And it's not quite clear what the Hebrew really says there. Some translators suggest it says he had cow eyes, which I'm not sure that's ever here. And Yahweh said, "Rise and anoint him, for this is the one." Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers. And the Spirit of Yahweh came mightily upon David from that day forward. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Let's be honest. Unlike Samuel, most of us would have gone ahead and anointed Eliab. I know that I would. If I had been paying enough attention in the first place that I heard God saying, "Go to Bethlehem to find a new king," and then Eliab showed up, well, I'd have thought, here's an answer. Here's the one. Get the oil. Pour it on his head. Glad that's over. Can't believe we found a new king so quickly. We Presbyterians have our own version of Samuel. Seeing how we love representative government, Samuel is not an individual. Samuel's a committee. A nominating committee. Big society. We have nominating committees that are charged to find those God is calling to serve as deacons and as ruling elders. And we have pastor nominating committees whose job is to find the one called to be a teaching elder or pastor. And as with Samuel, their job is to find the one God already has in mind. And we use fancy words like discernment to make clear that the task at hand is to listen for and sense the guidance of the Spirit directing us to the person God has already chosen. Now, clearly, I've had some recent experience here with a pastor nominating committee, although I do not know how they went about their discerning and deciding. I've not been here long enough to see an office of nominating committee in action. However, I've seen them in action in quite a few other churches, and I have talked with enough pastors from other churches to have some sense of what is typical. And the stereotypical pastor nominating committee goes something like this. A group of people, including the required representatives from sessions and deacons, are recruited and cajoled to this task. There are often people chosen to represent certain groups and interests in the congregation. It's common for there to be someone from Presbyterian women, someone from the youth, and so on. Then there is a congregational meeting, and they are elected. And then the hard work starts. A first meeting is set, and the members of the nominating committee arrive with their pictorial directories in hand. And they start about suggesting names, drawn from a list of usual suspects, people who are active in the committees and ministries of the church, those who are leaders in business and other areas, people with special skills, such as finance or administration or management that might seem to be useful, and so on. And once this list seems to be long enough, the committee then begins to figure out how to rank them so that they know who they will call first. And I've seen some interesting conversations as committees go through this ranking process, and people on the committee suggest why this person does or doesn't really look the part. And then finally, with the list prioritized, the phone calls get made. Hi, this is Joanne from the nominating committee, and we were wondering if you'd be willing to serve a term as an elder on session. And when enough people say yes, after occasionally some more meetings where more names have to be suggested, then there is another congregational meeting, and the members elect new officers, saying, at least implicitly, these are the ones God has called to lead us. Now, perhaps the stakes are nowhere near as high in this process as they are in our Old Testament reading for this morning. But the nominating committee has exactly the same job that Samuel does. Their job is to uncover the ones God already has in mind. But in my experience, most nominating committees would never have found David. Not unless Eliab and all his brothers had said no. And for that matter, most nominating committees would never have put the 12 disciples on their long list of possible He just didn't look the part. I mean, sometimes you wonder what Jesus was thinking, what he saw in them when he chose them. But then again, as God says to Samuel, Yahweh does not see as mortals see. So how do we align our sight with God's? How do we become more like Samuel? Able to hear God's no on Eliab. Able to wait patiently for God's choice to be revealed. Able to trust that David, this young, improbable candidate, is actually the one God has chosen. Now people sometimes assume that Samuel is some sort of spiritual prodigy. No way we could ever hear God's voice like he did. But if you know and have read Samuel's story, you know that he could not recognize God's voice the first time he heard it. He had to have help from the priest Eliab. And he only heard God the first time while he lay silent in the temple. Now, if you've ever served on a nominating committee, you've probably not experienced a great deal of silence. A great deal of stillness and waiting for God's will to be revealed. For that matter, there's often not a lot of prayer in nominating committees, other than that perfunctory prayer that goes at the beginning. In his book, Becoming a Blessed Church, Graham Standish writes that figuratively and literally, committees in most churches began a meeting by inviting God in the opening prayer. Then, by what they do and how they discuss proposals and make decisions, they basically tell God to wait outside in the hall until they have made their decision. And then in the closing prayer, they invite God back in to bless their decision. And I think Standish is correct, although I'm not really sure how it is we got to this place. It may be in part from a strange notion that God doesn't speak any longer as God once did in biblical times. I'm not sure where this comes from, this idea that people were closer to God long ago. Jesus has promised that the Spirit would be with his followers in every age. And if the Holy Spirit has abandoned the church, then we might as well close up shop. But I also think we are a little frightened of the Spirit. It threatens our sense of control. It may take us places we don't want to go. It may lead us in directions that don't make a lot of sense to us, that would demand that we trust God's guidance over our own. No thanks. We're just going to go ahead and make Eliab king, or at least put him on session. And so we go about the business of running the church, trying to keep the programs good, trying to keep the administration efficient and the funding adequate. But I think that many of us, maybe even most of us, long for something more. We wish we hadn't simply settled for Eliab. We wish that we could hear the voice of God. We want to hear God's voice, to see as God sees. We want to experience what Paul says he experiences, where in Christ everything is a new creation. Everything old has passed away. See, everything has become new. We want that. You ever been on a mission trip? Or on a spiritual retreat? Or to a monastery? Or to a church conference at a place like Montreat? And felt like you got a little closer to God? Such things are sometimes referred to as thin places. That is, places where the boundary between heaven and earth, us and God, almost disappears. And it seems we can reach out and touch holiness. We can commune with the Savior. Many of us have been in such thin places. But we've experienced the divine presence there, but then we come home. And the boundary, the barrier goes up again. We return to life as usual. That has certainly happened to me. But this barrier is not simply a matter of place. Thin places work their magic in part because we expect them to. Because we give them time to. Because we are attentive to that possibility while we are there. It's a curious thing that many people do not think of their church as a thin place. Sanctuaries certainly hold out that possibility, though often they seem more theater or concert hall than thin place. And if you look at church facilities, you'll see that very often little or no thought is given to the notion of thin places. Rare is the church that does not have a kitchen, some classrooms, a nursery, an office, some storage rooms. But rarer still is the church that does that. A meditation room, a prayer room, a lounge. Strange that we in the church have left the thin place business to others. Samuel carried a thin place along with him. The presence of God journeyed alongside. But I do not think it's a special dispensation for Samuel alone. No, Samuel had a long tutelage and years of practice in drawing near to God, in time spent in prayer and silence, waiting for God's will to be revealed. He had spent years with his spiritual director, Eliab. And he had learned never simply to do what he wanted or what he thought best, but to pray and wait and listen for what God wanted. When Samuel went to Bethlehem looking for a new king, Eliab passed before him, and Samuel thought, wow, surely this is the Lord's anointed. Eliab was the oldest son, and he looked every inch the part. But Samuel knew well how God worked. He knew how God sees. And so he waited. Perhaps even half expecting that God had other plans. All praise and glory to the God who is still speaking to us today. Thanks be to God.